Welcome in, disc golfers. I'm Damien. This is Jay, and this is Attention Deficit Disorder.
Disorder, yes.
Right. The numbers on a disc. When I started playing disc golf, it was something that you saw, and it was a wonderful guide when a new product came out, sort of where it fit on the...
What it's supposed to do. It's a guideline on
Correct.
what the disc is supposed to do.
Right.
Whether it does that for your arm or not is up to you to throw it and figure it out.
Right.
A lot of people hate the flight numbers.
Right. Which is an interesting thing because you see technology catching up to disc golf in a way that I saw it, having played golf for a very long time, really changed that sport and really changed that sport from an entry-level perspective. And what I mean by that is if you're coming into golf today, it's a much different experience in getting equipment than it was coming into golf 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and beyond that, of course. Where you would buy something that the local pro had and take it on the course, and you managed your way around with those set of irons, the driver and wood. It was sort of a one standardized suit fits all, and there was some flexing and some bending that went on with some of the steel, but not very often. And those were usually players that had been playing for a while and could manipulate the ball and needed a better angle to come at it in their swing. So technology bridged the average person to be able to come into a very difficult learning curve of sport. Like, it's not easy to learn golf.
No.
You're standing still, you're turning, the weight balance, the hands, the coordination, the keeping the head still, a lot going on.
Very precise.
Very precise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're swinging something well over 100 miles an hour. So what technology did was allow these teaching professionals the opportunity to really see where this person was at in their development. And based on that, they could give them the appropriate grip size, the appropriate shaft, the flex in the shaft, the appropriate club head, perimeter weighting, allowing for a lot more forgiveness. So if you didn't hit it perfectly square, it would still fly off.
Still forgiving, right?
Still forgiving enough. Where you would enjoy the shot and you're not constantly fighting the game. So technology really helped propel a lot of average golfers to better golfers more quickly. And that helped grow the sport. We've all seen how big golf has gotten in the last 20 years.
That's right.
It's really incredible, right? Now, I see the same thing happening, I believe, with the technology in disc golf.
Yeah.
And forgive me for not knowing the name of the company.
Is it Tech Disc?
Yeah, I think it is.
They've got a few options to put a little bit of chips right in the middle of the disc, and then you throw it into a net, and all the data populates.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a game changer, and I would think a game changer from what I'm seeing in my position as now I'm coming in, I'm looking at numbers, sure, on a new disc that helps me determine where that's going to fit in the bag potentially, or whether or not I'm a buyer or not. But if you tell me that my arm speed is this and my release point is that, whether it's hyzer, anhyzer, and now this data is just flooding us with accuracy. I would imagine, and you, the owner of a beautiful disc golf store here in Phoenix,
thank you,
will undoubtedly be directing people towards certain sections based on what that arm speed.
It would certainly
and what
help.
What that can do for a disc.
Because then I would understand where you're at. Because right now it's all interview process of what you're throwing now, how far is it flying, are you turning anything over?
Right.
It's all me asking if you got prior experience in other sports. If I could just have them throw a couple of discs into a net and see what their snap is like, automatically I know, oh, you can actually handle a 9-speed. Whereas if you're a little bit slower and you're not getting rotations on the disc, well, let's start a little bit slower. Let's get you like a mid-range and a putter first and figure those out before you start moving up to the driver range.
And I'm thankful that you did that for me. Because when I met you, I was very new to the game. And you, as much as, and again, I'll make another golf analogy. When you go to the driving range with your buddies, the first thing you want to do is grab a driver. And everyone does.
Smash it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
everyone does, and we understand why, because you want to see that ball go. But in learning the game and the development of the game, it's better to learn with the slower discs learn what your arm is capable of doing and get your timing down, and then continue to move up.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for golf. You start with a wedge, learn how to hit a wedge, something around the green, and then move your way back.
Okay.
And then eventually get to the driver.
Same concept. Yeah.
Same concept. It really hasn't changed that much in terms of the right way to do it. But now everyone doesn't get to do it that way, right? Because some people will learn with their friends and they go out once in a blue moon and they're using the wrong discs.
Yeah, their friend might hand them a Shrike or a Destroyer. Like, yeah, here's a 12-speed driver. That's what you need.
Right. Because it's the driver.
Then they hate it.
Right. So to your point, I look at 9 speeds with my arm speed, knowing my arm speed somewhere in the 50s, mid 50s range. And for my age, it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm still finding more speed every now and then.
Yeah.
I find a little something that tweaks it just enough for me to get the most out of the disc at, let's say, a 7 or 8 speed is about a 50 mile an hour arm. And I know for sure, obviously, the guys on tour can throw it the same disc at 70 miles an hour and it'll go that much further. But for me, I think the disc is doing what those numbers are suggesting it's going to do when I get that enough of that miles per hour going.
When you get the right pull, it's going to do what those flight numbers indicate, yes.
Right. And it's not necessarily the best idea to take that same arm speed into those higher numbers and expect to get the same result. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen, is it?
No, not quite. Because it's all about rotation. If you don't have the speed to come out of your hand and snap the disc, so it's actually spinning, you're not going to see a 13 speed as many rotations as your 9 speed will get.
Yeah.
So then you're not going to see that indication what the disc says it's supposed to do.
And again, that was so valuable to me, and I think that's the reason why I wanted to start there, because no matter where you are in your disc golf journey, we're going to have something for everybody.
I think so.
With you being a seasoned veteran and an owner of the store, and someone that I've seen firsthand give very good information out from your knowledge, and so I think that's important to tell our listeners that, and our viewers, that it isn't going to be just about the basics. This will get, as you can see, the 3 discs out front. This will get into a lot of different things that are relevant in the sport, and as enthusiasts of the sport, I hope that comes out.
We're supposed to touch on all things disc golf.
Right.
That's kind of what we want to broaden disc golf. There's so many facets to the sport that we should talk about.
Right.
That people that aren't talking about.
Right. Well, they do, but you're going to have to watch about 6 episodes of this, that, and the other in order to get maybe a little tinkling of this or a little sprinkling of that.
Yeah. Has any podcast touched on the collector market yet?
I don't know. None that I've seen.
Well, I know Foundation, actually, shout out Foundation, has spoken about their 20-year buzzes. I watched the other day on their warehouse update.
Nice job with that.
They're talking about their collector value of these things because it says Wasp on the rim. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. I used to throw a 10-year buzz, and I knew the collector value of those when I owned a bunch of them. And it was pretty interesting stuff that they were touching on. Yeah, certain foils guys, discraft people are foil guys. That can make or break a disc. The fact that something might be printed a little different. I've got a discraft disc here as a matte white foil. Somebody might go crazy over that. Not just the fact that it's a 4-claw back when Macbeth was a 4-time world champion instead of a 6-time like he is now.
And that has, collector value is obvious on that for that reason.
For that reason, yeah. Macbeth fans, there's quite a lot because he was top 2 in the last, how many world championships?
10 years. It was a full decade, wasn't it?
10 consecutive.
First or second?
First or seconds. Unbelievable.
Not sure that'll ever be done in any sport.
I don't think so.
Golf. No one does that in golf. No one does that in tennis. Individual sports where you're
swimming, any of them.
You're coming to the main event, the Masters. I think in golf, and we watched Tiger win. I think it's 5 Masters, and but he wasn't in second place for all those other times. He was up there, but we appreciate that type of quality performance in our favorite players.
It's a fearsome athlete.
When they can bring up that level of play at the right time
Yeah,
is so hard to do.
that's right.
So hard to do. And yeah, so we appreciate it and all the accolades in the world. And obviously he's been rewarded handsomely for doing it.
Got a big contract through Discraft, yeah.
And that's certainly propelled the sport. And we'll probably touch on that at some point
Mm-hmm.
as well. These contracts that have gone out, and can the sport afford to keep doing it? I think there's something there to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So to get back to the disc, obviously I know the one in the center, the Berg, because I throw it, and I understand the coloring of that and what that first run means, coloring.
Yep.
But talk to me about the Monster, because I know absolutely nothing about that disc.
The Monster's an interesting disc. That disc was produced in, when was it? 2006 was the first Monster. It's overstable 10-speed. Obviously, there aren't flight numbers on this one. They didn't have a flight number system back then. So you can kind of tell an older end of a disc by the flight numbers, yes. Okay. If it has flight numbers on it, well, it's been made after 2008 timeframe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. The Monster is one of the first discs that I started collecting because I loved it. The reason why I started collecting it was because I would throw it, and it flew amazing for me. It was my favorite disc almost immediately. So I bagged 3 of them. I bagged a Star, a Champ, and a Pro line, actually, because they were 3 different molds. They had 3 different molds in the Monster. This is obnoxious. They had an original mold in this mold, the Pro line, the first runs. After that, they did a X mold and an L mold. 3 different molds in one disc.
Huh.
So
that's an interesting thing. Was it to make you buy more discs, or is it because there was 3 molds?
I think it's probably a selling tactic.
Okay.
You've got to buy a lot more Monsters now. If you didn't get one that you liked, you got one that you really, really fell in love with, and you go to try to find another one because you lost it or you just want a backup. And it's a lot harder to find all of a sudden. You got to buy 4 of them to get one that you want.
Well, from the business side of that, I understand it, but it also is it's a two-edged sword. Your loyalty towards the brand, if they're not producing the consistency, that Big Mac, if you will, is the same on this side of town as it is the other side of town for a reason.
Yeah.
You're going to come back to it, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that and I understand that, again, technology has come such a long way in pressing of these discs, where I think probably the drying aspect or the cooling aspect of it is way more consistent than what it used to be. They're probably laying these things out on the table at one point, right? And maybe there's a air conditioning unit that's blowing on one side of the room and not the other, and those discs are you know what I mean?
Humidity in the air,
never
have an effect.
All those things.
That's all
those things. And I think these controlled environments that these machines are in now, and I'm thinking of Europe because I've seen the Latitude 64 video, and somehow that's mesmerizing to watch that disc come out of the, isn't it? I think it's fantastic.
Well, so you've got a couple decisions to make when you learn that your favorite disc becomes out of production. You can either throw something else or buy as many of these things as you can because this is your favorite thing and I'm not willing to throw anything else.
Well, I think
that creates a collector market alone.
Yeah, for sure it would. I get that. But in today's climate, looking around at your store right here, there's options.
There's plenty of other discs that fly just like that one.
If you don't want to make it for me, in my business, which is outside of disc golf, if I run a back order on anything, and that is absolutely the Achilles heel, it is not allowed. We try as hard as we can, and through COVID, that is a very difficult thing to accomplish because everyone was backed up on what they needed, right? And we all needed everything yesterday. Once everything started getting rolling again, so there's this backlog of stuff, and customers will go where they can get what they need. Mm-hmm. So there's a loyalty to a certain extent, and then there isn't. So and I think that the reason we see so many wonderful companies coming into this space is opportunity, but also there's gaps in some of the things, and there's
still room to move in.
Little nuances, and plastics are different. Some certainly improved since I've been here.
Oh yeah,
really cool stuff coming out. And
I think the Berg is one of those niche discs. It filled a gap that a lot of people didn't know they needed. It's a disc that doesn't glide. Throw it as hard as you can. It's not going to go that far.
Yeah,
it's kind of amazing.
Right. And there was just this love-hate that I recognized right away with this disc, and which only made me curious about it. Like, why would so many people say they love it and it's the thing to throw? And somebody would say, are you kidding me right now with that? It's the worst thing I've ever thrown in my life.
I might have said both to you at a certain point.
Well, I can tell you, I see them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I see them absolutely everywhere.
It's immensely popular for a reason.
Yeah. And there was even a really windy day here in Phoenix, and people, I think, maybe understand that we're very hot here in July and August, and it is extremely hot here in July and August. However, we get a lot of wind. We get more wind than I think people realize here. It's not Kansas wind,
no,
mind you,
but not Texas wind. We
get monsoon seasons during the summer, and there's only a couple of months during the year that it's really sort of calm. Most of the time, there's a wind blowing. So
the weather changes from morning to afternoon time. So when it starts out at 70 in the AM and it's 110 by the afternoon, that's going to create a lot of wind.
Right.
A lot of stuff's moving around in their dust bowl here.
Right. That's correct. And so I found that the Berg, on those occasions I've had it in the bag, I've brought it out to putt with. Mm-hmm. It just, I knew it, it requires a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
But I could count on that thing going where it needed to go.
Yes.
And I've done it for a while, and I still always carry one for that reason, which is interesting. But everyone's got that go-to in wind.
Well, you need to have a go-to
in
wind. If you
not
don't,
just it's from tee to green. There's those go-tos, right?
Yes.
It's not just a disc.
Yes.
So I want to know more about this. What's the value at these days?
For the Berg, one sold
first-run Berg.
A first-run Berg. It was brand new. One of them sold last year for, it was $3,600 some odd dollars.
Wow.
$3,600.
That is really crazy.
It's kind of insane.
I love it.
But that's how popular that disc is.
Yeah.
And I think we're only going to see more of that popularity moving forward. If Castoplast doesn't have the same popularity now that they're being produced by Latitude, that disc only goes up in value because people want that old Castoplast made plastic. They want the one made in Stockholm, not the one made in whatever weird Swedish town that Latitude's in.
So that has some value. That
creates a whole other facet of value. That's right.
That's super cool. I had no idea.
Yep. Innova's even got discs that are produced in Ontario, California, rather than wherever the other ones are produced.
Yeah.
They have Ontario molds versus Santa Cruz molds.
It's just, there's so many layers to this game that beyond just the game itself, that I find absolutely fascinating and fun.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly surprised by it. That. Just surprised me. It's in a bag because you're not going to bring it out anymore until that day.
I'm probably not going to take it out of the bag until I need to take pictures of it for a potential buyer that says, hey, I'm going to give you my firstborn, the keys to my car, and $10,000 for that Berg. And I'll say, well, yeah,
be careful what you wish for. There's guys out there with $10,000. There are. We just discussed briefly about arm speed and the importance of that. I saw a video that showed, it was Simon Lizotte, and Simon, probably one of the best disc golf videos I've seen on throwing a disc, controlled environment with the speed. He had his buddy with him in the field. And if I can find it, we'll maybe link this so people can see this, because you have to watch this video. And obviously a lot of people watch Simon videos, but this one's from a while ago. But I stumbled across it, and I was so intrigued by the fact that he had his buddy with him in a field, and his buddy had a radar gun, and the radar gun was showing Simon's arm speed. Well, both of their arm speeds. And what they were doing is they were comparing the two. Okay, if that's 50 miles an hour and you're throwing it, and it's 50 miles an hour and I'm throwing it, why is it so different? So it's nose angle, it's rotation, all those things obviously are in play. But the most fascinating thing about that, well, there's a couple of fascinating things about this video. One is the fact that Simon can nail, he's going to say, I'm going to throw it 35 miles an hour, and boom, 35 miles an hour.
On the head. And
he had 4 discs that he was throwing. He had putters, he had a mid, he had fairway, and then he had a distance. Okay. So he would throw each of them all at that one speed and then see what the result would be.
Yeah.
And then move up incrementally.
In speed, right?
Correct. And dial it within a mile per hour every time,
That's so impressive.
all the way up the ladder
Mm-hmm.
to 70 miles an hour within
Damn.
a mile per hour.
Yeah.
Incredible, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. You have to watch this video, Simon. You are something else.
Well, it would show what the disc would do, right? So at a 35 mile an hour, his distance driver probably didn't do very much.
Well, and that's sort of the point I was getting at, was that in this arm speed conversation that we're having, and where this technology is starting to bridge these things all together, what you thought would go maybe not as far would go further. What you thought would go further didn't go as far.
Mm-hmm.
And these gaps were created because of what we were talking about a minute ago, in how much are you throwing that disc to the numbers where it's designed to be thrown at? Are you giving it enough arm speed? Are you giving it enough rotation to see those numbers really work? Where if it says it's a 2-fade, it's a 2-fade. If it says, it's or a turn, a 2-turn, and it's coming back, you're seeing that because you're giving it what you're supposed to be giving it. Okay.
Yeah.
Bring these things together, and being someone that talks to customers all day long, all week long, going into different seasons. We're 2 hours from Flagstaff, Arizona, which is at 7,000 feet compared to 1,000 feet here in Phoenix or less.
Yeah, the elevation makes a big difference in how your discs
Makes
fly.
a huge difference. We don't have a lot of humidity here, so we get a lot more out of our discs than people maybe realize. You can come here, and if you want to throw 350 feet for the first time, come to Arizona. and
Air's nice and thin.
Give it a good huck. Yeah.
You can slice right through it.
Right.
It's not like the humid air where it bogs your disc down a little bit.
Yeah. I've noticed when I'm in the Midwest, things seem to float a little bit better, but they don't go as far.
That's right.
Yeah. It's really things get a little more exaggerated on turn and fades. But
yeah, there's more for the air to rotate.
Right.
The higher the friction, right? It's going to have more turn out of it and less glide because it's got more drag, but more exaggerated flight features.
Yeah,
exactly
and you
that.
see it.
Yeah, you do. It's noticeable.
Yeah. I was at Pickard this year, and first of all, how those guys play in that humidity, and that grass was so healthy.
Yeah.
It was almost the run up. I don't know how they could honestly run up and get that sort of speed without, by the end of the day, you're exhausted because it's like running in sand. The grass was so thick, so healthy.
Yeah.
And no one talks about that. Like the kind of shape these guys are in.
They're true professional athletes.
They really, really are. And
you got to put together 4 back-to-back peak performances to win these tournaments. You're competing with the best in the world. You've got to trudge through the humidity and the heat and the grass and the sand and whatever have you. To put together a good disc golf round, to put together some scores.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I can tell you from, again, where I was in Minnesota, they put the first baskets in 78. And so I'll give you a little bit of my age. But we were young and we were curious. Like, I saw it, and it was in the park that was literally next to the house. So we all brought our beach frisbees down there with the big rims on them.
Yeah.
And we'd go play, and it would literally fillet your index finger from one end to the other. It would just carve it wide open from the edge on the release point, just going over top of the finger as it was leaving your hand. And there was nothing left by the end of the day. So you couldn't go play the next day.
Shoot.
Right? So we owe a lot of thank yous and credit to this sport progressing from that to these disc manufacturers and the inventor and the patents and all the things that came years after that to change the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of groundwork from then to now. I mean, we're 40 years now away from the first ever disc golf specific disc.
Yeah.
Before then, it was all frisbees, like you experienced.
Yeah, and maybe we'll touch more on the next episode.
That sounds like another segment.
Give us a little history lesson.
Yeah, there's some weird bits of terminology in disc golf.
Let's just cover that real quick.
Yeah, hyzer, anhyzer.
Right.
You have.
Which is good. Now, where I would like to see the game, because I think it deserves it, is separation from golf.
There's a lot of shared terminology, yeah.
It's disc golf. It deserves to be its own thing. It's a wonderful thing. I was trying to get at it a little earlier, and I don't know if I made the point, but I find this game to be more enjoyable.
I agree. The flight of the disc is completely different
than
from golf.
I do golf, and I can hit a golf ball 300 yards, but who cares, right? At the end of the day, who cares? I don't even care. But a lot of people spend their whole lives trying to hit a golf ball 300 yards. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal. That's 900 feet.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a massive drive.
Right. The ball's sailing forever. It looks really cool. But there's something about this game where that isn't happening. But if you've ever seen Anthony Barella on a tee box and you hear the disc in the air when it's leaving his hand.
Yeah. It's fizzing through the air like a bullet.
It is
slicing.
Just as entertaining as watching, these guys at the Phoenix Open hit it 300, 350 yards. Some of them can go even further now. It's getting absolutely out of control. Mm. But that's why people go. I think they go to the Phoenix Open for the party, and then I think they go to see these balls go 350 yards.
Well, you want to see the pros play. They're the
when
best
they can't even see it. At that point, let me tell you, you can't even see it. It's gone. It's out of sight. So I don't even know why that's even so exciting. Because you can't see it land.
Yeah.
It's too far down there.
Yeah.
It's a little ball. But we all want to see the big arms in disc golf. It has a purpose. And that's not going to go away. As much as this game may have been grown in the woods to a certain extent, mm-hmm. for it to become more of a mainstream sport, which it's Jeff Spring and these guys seem to be pretty.
They're spearheading towards a direction, man. They're really getting some stuff done.
Yeah, they seem to be some really sharp guys, and his team and everyone else involved in directing it towards a sport that brings advertising dollars, which increases the purses, which increases salaries, obviously, which increases disc sales, ultimately. Everyone wins with the Disc Golf Pro Tour is driving this in the right direction. That's really sort of
They kind of have a monopoly on the sport at the moment, and I don't mind supporting it. They're doing a good job.
Well, as an entrepreneur, you take the risk, you should get some of that reward.
Yep.
Right? All right. So,
exactly right.
Yeah, they're taking a lot of risk. Someone is. There's a lot of cash flow going out if they've got. Now we've transitioned into live, which is pretty darn cool.
They've gotten better at that every year.
It is so great.
From last year to this year was a huge improvement.
Huge. And looking at it, the aesthetics of it, the optics of it, I'm wanting to put a product that's outside of the disc golf market in the market, because I like the looks of this. And there's some correlation. It's like an LL Bean. It's not an outdoors thing, but it's similar in nature. Outdoors, LL Bean and disc golf is a marriage made in heaven. Mm-hmm. That type of, and Merrill we saw over in Europe.
Yep, that's right.
Marriage made in heaven. That's exactly what needs to happen.
Well, when the courses look the way they do, and the tournament is as organized as it is, and then they've got the coverage on top of that for viewers all over the world to watch, of course you want to put your name on that as a sponsor. It's incredible to have your name on something that manicured and clean and pretty.
Yeah. So to squirrel it back to, this is why we named our show appropriately, to squirrel it back to the topic at hand, which was the nomenclature, if you will, of disc golf.
Right.
Okay, so you've got Heiser, Anheuser. We've had long discussions, and we won't
burden the crowd.
About is it a hole or is it a basket?
It's not a literal hole, but it's played as a hole,
right,
from front to end.
And we think that that's just fine. The definition of a hole in golf is really from the tee to the green anyway. It's not the cup. You're not playing cup.
Right.
It's cup one. Which to your argument was it's not basket one, it's hole one, because it's the entirety of it.
Yes.
WHOL.
You're not calling it the whole hole, yes.
Right. So, and behave. And and I think I think most would agree that hole's just fine. The fact that it's 18 seems very relevant to golf.
And it feels like the right amount of play, too. Of course, you can keep on playing if you've got the stamina for it.
Well, I don't think there'd be anyone that says you couldn't have more.
I wouldn't argue.
When it comes to disc golf.
Yep. I wouldn't be happy with less, but I would be happy with more.
And we're not talking like golf where the property values are incredibly high, so that acreage needed to put 2 more golf holes in would be astronomical.
Yeah, huge.
Whereas in disc golf,
It could be a 200-foot hole.
you could add easily.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, I'd like to see it change. I'd like to see it go 10-10.
Oh, 20 hole.
I love it. If it was a 20 hole, to me, it gives it just a little bit more of its own identity. It isn't that 18 hole thing. But I get and I understand how it got there because of golf.
Yep.
People identify with that. It's easier to explain. So I'm sure our founders in the sport were thinking along those lines too. It's a lot easier to explain at 18, or maybe that was the square footage they had for what they were going to do.
Could have certainly helped it grow to call it just golf in general. Hey, it's a green, it's a hole. We play it like this. You count your strokes.
All right, let's talk about green.
It's not really a green.
No. I walk up to it, a lot of times it's mud. And now it's wood chips.
Yeah, wood chips if you're on a good course. Yeah.
Well done. So the Disc Golf Pro Tour has done a nice job in understanding that those aesthetics matter in a very big way. Because I'm someone that wants to introduce the sport to others, but there's some of the older footage I'm less likely to show them. And this isn't, I'm not picking on anybody. It's just how the game evolved. Look, I'm sure there's a lot of footage in golf back in the day that's pretty rough. And you can even see Jack Nicklaus, and they were doing the shell where they would have a match play tournament with another person. It was covered by one of the major networks, and they would have an 18-hole match play tournament. And the greens at Pebble Beach, the bunkers at Pebble Beach were rough compared to what they look like now aesthetically.
Yeah.
They were overgrown. It didn't look as detailed in terms of its manicure.
It's so hard to imagine. Right. That's all I've ever seen golf as being on the top tier of like the wealthiest sports on the planet.
No, it became that.
Right.
It became that. And so disc golf has had its roots in that same sort of way. But when I'm explaining it to people and I'm trying to introduce them to the game and I want to show them some Joe Mintz coverage or some of the other post-production coverage or even live now, I'm hustling them into the television room and, hey, you look,
check this out.
Look at this design of this hole. And now we just saw Worlds.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of how beautiful disc golf can be and is becoming.
Yeah.
And hopefully that becomes more of the standard. And I understand, hey, we're in parks. You're going to have that history of those parks out there, and the cities only have so much in the budget to continue the maintenance of those. And it's usually these clubs that bring it up and change the baskets and sweep the tees and change the tees out. Mm-hmm. So all of that is good. And I'm not saying that it's anything but good. But it's really good that this money is starting to get put into the sport outside of the sport.
It's definitely getting there.
Yeah.
And the more we progress forward, it can't really go down at this point with how many people have started playing and are really into it.
Right.
The amount of disc golf addicts out there are huge.
Right.
PDGA numbers are up into the 270-some thousands.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's great. And is that globally?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. I bet you it's a lot more than that.
Oh, well, there's plenty of players out there without a PDGA number.
Right.
The amount of rec players that come in here that don't want a PDGA number. There are even old heads out there that don't want a PDGA number because they don't really care to play in the tournaments. They just want to play because it's fun.
Right.
Good exercise.
It is. I mean, I'm all for supporting, so I'm very much involved. I have a number and everything else, which we'll talk about maybe next episode. The number thing. I have some feelings about that.
Yeah.
That you probably wouldn't share from being in the sport longer, even though I was throwing discs in 79, right?
Yeah. Yeah, your PDGA number could have been in the double digits, triple digits.
Yeah.
Could have been. Right?
We knew it was there. We were trying to play it as best we could. But you tape up your hand and you can only do this. And I was learning golf and I was becoming a pretty good golfer, so I didn't want to. I couldn't hold the club if I was all flayed up.
Right.
So it's like, oh man, that hurts when I golf now.
Got to focus on
one or the other. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's kind of too bad because I honestly would have really ran with this sport at a young age because I think, and that's another thing that's so great about disc golf is it doesn't matter your social status. This is a game for everybody, and it's easy to get into. It's affordable to get into. Discs are not like golf balls, although you can lose them, but they usually come back, which is unbelievable to me. So I know you've got a lost and found bin here. That's impressive. So people lose them, but they come back as long as you write your name and your number on there. So if you're getting into the game, write your name and phone number on the disc on
all of them.
And chances will it'll come back to you.
Hopefully you get a text or a call.
Yeah. So these kids, and whether it be inner city or rural or whatever it is, can have a few discs, go into a park, and have an absolutely awesome day. Just awesome.
Yep.
And another thing I love about it is I'm not spending an hour to get to the golf course, 4 hours playing 18 holes of golf, and then another hour in a clubhouse after that. It's a 6-hour day. And by the time I get home, there's nothing I want to do. My energy level's gone.
That sounds terrible to me.
Yeah. The
amount of disc golf I could get in 6 hours, man.
Yeah.
I play a lot of disc golf in 6 hours.
Well, here's the thing. I can play 18 holes at the local course in an hour and have a better workout than that 6 hours with golf. Walking, throwing a disc, ab workout, the turn, the athleticism that disc golf is. I don't think people realize on the outside how athletic that move is.
Yeah.
And the post-production and live really shows us, how good these top guys are.
They make it effortless.
They're so good. They're so good. And when you see it in slow motion and everything else, it's you really identify the mechanics of it, and then what's similar from player to player and what's not similar from player to player. But at the end of the day, it's just like golf.
Yeah.
When you're hitting that ball, it doesn't matter what you do from here to here, as long as your hands are exactly where they have to be at point of impact.
Okay.
To keep the club face doing what it's designed to do at impact.
Okay.
At the maximum amount of speed. It doesn't matter what it looks like, as long as it gets there.
Yes.
And I see that in disc golf. I see where it's doesn't matter necessarily how it comes out of your hand. Who's this guy I've been seeing lately? Fox. He throws only. I think his last name's Fox, isn't it? He's just unbelievable athlete.
Yeah.
And he throws this wicked sidearm.
Unbelievable
and
overhand.
Then he's throwing.
Wolf.
Is it Wolf?
Wolf. I think it's Jake Wolf. Yes.
That was close. Sorry, man.
No, he's ridiculous with his overhands.
Yeah.
Because off the tee pad, you're looking at the fairway, and this guy's like this.
Tomahawking.
What are you looking at?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And the rollers I was watching him throw, I'm like, wait, there's like 14 trees down. How are you going to get a roller through that? He's trying it. And he was right up there. He had, I just saw where he played pretty well. So I think that's really cool. It doesn't matter on the tee, in the fairway. Only thing that matters is what that score is when you're picking it out of the basket.
Well, that's a beautiful bit of freedom about the sport. Any which way to get from point A to point B, however you can make it happen, whether it takes a roller, a forehand, a backhand, an overhand, any which way. Turnover, flex lines, there's so many different ways to throw all these discs, and they all fly ever so slightly different.
Right.
So however you can manipulate the disc to do what you want it to do is so much fun. It is unbelievably fun.
So getting back to the greens, it's not a green. We've decided that.
Not green.
It's a radius. It's a circle. It's circle 1 and circle 2.
Which is an awesome way to designate that.
I love it, and I would. Can we please stop and move away from calling it a green? Because when you call it circle 1, I know that distance from circle 1 in. When you call it a bullseye, I know the bullseye in. When you call it circle 2, I'm still, how far is circle 2 out? I don't put you a spot.
Well, it's double circle 1. And circle 1 is like 33 feet.
So
circle 2 should be
60 foot if you're out there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And these guys are making it way too often for that hard and
Well, yeah, watching Ricky during the World Championships, there were some putts where he ended up just canning a 45-foot putt. It took him almost no time to think about it. He just walked up. He knows his putt. He knows his shot. He just putted in. And on camera, it looks really, really easy when you're sitting at home. But then you step out 45 feet from the basket, and you try to make that putt,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is impossible.
No. And that's the part where it doesn't translate on television as well. And golf is the same way. You don't appreciate the steepness of number 10 at Augusta until you actually walk down it. You could ski down that hill, but you don't. It just looks like it's a dogleg left. And it's the same with disc golf. You don't appreciate some of the hill climbing that's going on with these players, or
The shot shapes, the trees,
the shot shapes, and
angles.
They don't. I mean, you're in a golf. You're in a perfect fairway. If you're in the fairway, it's perfect, man. You may have to work your balance a little bit, where you have to put your weight a little bit more forward or your weight a little bit more back to compensate. And in disc golf, I know it's the same, but you still need some cases a run up if you've got to get some torque out there. And
you
so
get some distance.
You've got an uneven ground. You've got stuff that isn't manicured, and that is maybe other things about details of the sport that I think are fantastic. But yeah, so a radius, and saying it's circle 1 and circle 2, I think gives it its own identity again. It pushes it away from golf more, which I think is necessary in becoming its own sport.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just one person, but coming from golf and having played for a long time and a fairly good level and competitive level, that this deserves its own identity.
It should be a little bit more individual. There's no clubs or balls. It's people and discs.
Yeah.
So
you're starting to see caddies now.
Yep, and you see
which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you still have birdies, bogeys, eagles, albatross. You still have a stroke to count your
great point
throw.
But for some reason that fits, right? So it's like the hole, and
it still fits. Yes.
Yeah, it fits because golf's been around for over 600 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, the old course in St. Andrews. What's really funny, you go over to St. Andrews and you play that. There's a course right next to it, and it says the new course, and it was built in, let's say, like the 1600s.
That's the new one.
It's the new one.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a trip. I didn't know the disc that regular golf was 600 years old.
Yeah.
That's insane. How were they hitting a little tiny ball?
They weren't. They were hitting a feather. It's because it was a little feather ball.
A feather ball?
Yeah, it was all these feathers that were sort of wrapped into and tied around almost like a baseball, like leather.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hickory shafts, imagine on a humid day, if they weren't stored properly.
Yeah.
Right.
Warped as can be.
Right.
Like these poor Frisbees can be. I tell people not to store them in their trunk.
Right.
Especially here. The amount of people that bring trade-ins, like, oh, these are my discs that I usually leave. I'm like, well, I can tell.
Right. So I think that's great. I think, talking about it, maybe it gets the conversation going. I'm sure a lot of other people are talking about it too, obviously. That I just feel passionate about it, and that's why I brought it up, that disc golf deserves its own identity. And I think the more you can separate from golf, the better. So you've got hole, that's fine. You've got 18 holes, which is fine. I still think it should be 20. You've got birdies and bogeys and sort of all that stuff. A fade in golf is when the ball goes from right to left.
Okay.
And a draw, or I'm sorry, left to right. And a draw is right to left. So what golf calls a draw is what you call a fade.
Yeah, super weird.
So that so they separated it, but then you called a turn, which is a fade in golf.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I like the turn, the fade, and the hyzer and hyzer terminology, because it adds up in my brain to do what the disc is supposed to do.
Right.
It definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
As far as characterizing disc golf on its own sport, I think that's on its way.
Yeah.
A lot of disc golfers are not ball golfers. I don't like ball golf. I know a lot of disc golfers have transferred over, just like yourself, and prefer disc golf over golf now, but they still like golf. They'll still go play every now and again.
I haven't since.
Good for you.
40-some years, and I went cold turkey.
Fully support that.
No one understands it at home. None of the friends.
Why didn't you golf anymore, man?
It doesn't make sense to them, because I was a decent golfer and I had a good time. I had the golf cart, leave the house, go to the club, play. that was my life, right? And all of a sudden, James Conrad, shout out to James Conrad, we're all going through COVID, and I like, hey, that's the sport I played in the late 70s in the park. What? Look at all the people around him, right? And he throws this thing in from 250 feet, whatever it was.
It was an envy.
And then come to find out later how important of a shot that was. And it was done earlier in the day in the FPO with Katrina Allen. She had to throw as difficult or even maybe more difficult of a shot to win the tournament.
Yeah.
And no one really talks about that as much because it didn't go in.
It got shadowed,
It got shadowed, but it was as gutsy a shot as James Conrad. So
she executed it perfectly.
Oh my gosh. So if ever you run into either one of them, Katrina or James, buy them a beer, because I believe that moment was amazing. But James Conrad's moment, because it went in, and then he ultimately won in the playoff. I found the sport again as a result of that being everywhere on YouTube.
Created a little culture bomb of disc golf.
Crazy. I must have watched it 10 times before I figured out what I was really watching.
How immense that moment was, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think you can downplay the importance of it in the sport. Mm-hmm. And good on MVP for holding him to their company, because that was a pivotal moment, I'm sure, for them. The envy.
It was actually, and here it
was
crazy.
Out there, and it's just such a great throwing disc. Over 200 for me. That is just, I love that disc. It is, and everyone knows that by now. But I really feel I don't know if it's important for me to say that, because I know I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I know that there's others out there that saw that shot and got curious about what's going on in disc golf again. Look at the people there. And they're all going absolutely bananas. There's more to this shot than just some guy in a park and his buddy standing behind him and filming it, right?
Yeah.
And it goes in.
The crowd acted appropriately.
Oh, it was just
they
fantastic.
Blew up.
I loved every second of that.
That's like a goal in the World Cup in the 91st minute.
Right.
That's what the reaction was like from the crowd.
Right. You won't remember this, but I have a hockey background too. When the Olympics were in Vancouver, it was for the gold medal, Canada versus United States.
Titans, man.
And the United States is down, 20 seconds to play, pulls the goalie with about a minute to play.
Okay.
Gets the puck into Canada's end, 20 seconds to play, 15 seconds to play, 10 seconds to play. Zach Parise scores. The gold medal game in the Olympics, U.S. and Canada, is going to overtime. You talk about eruption.
Yeah.
Like a global eruption of anyone who's ever watched hockey. That was a moment. And I'm not comparing James's moment to this, but it's as seismic in this industry.
For sure.
Without a question.
Yes.
It was that seismic.
Yes.
And then you have all your other, Ken Klymos and certainly Paul Macbeth and his accomplishments of late, and Ricky's world championships and their battles that they've had. All those things have just layered and made this product so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so much better.
Yeah, really competitive.
And getting these manufacturers to, dial up their game, putting discs out there, and realizing that there's an opportunity here to do that. So, all right. Well, if you're still with us, thank you. And thank you, Jay.
Good fun, man.
Great. Till the next one. We'll come up with some even crazier stuff than this.
And we're going to be giving away stuff.
Yes. Stay tuned.